It's a special kind of disappointment when it comes at the hands of people or an organization that you had been vocally supporting before. SAG-AFTRA. Oh. Oh. So, you may or may not have heard. Last week, SAG-AFTRA reached an agreement for the use of AI and AI replicas to be created for video games and interactive media with a specific AI company. So this isn't a broad overarching one. This is with a specific organization. And voice actors are pissed, like really, really ticked off. I caught wind of this pretty quick. I didn't know if I was going to talk about it, though. Not because I don't think it's important. It is. I was kind of hoping more people would talk about it. This has not gotten nearly the coverage it should have, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I really didn't want to have to try and parse through, negotiation, documentation, or summations, or any of the kinds of stuff that I had to go through talking about the SAG-AFTRA agreement and the resolution of that strike. I was kind of burnt out on trying to parse that stuff. So I just didn't have it in me. Well, as I said, not enough people have talked about it, and it's pretty bad. So we are going to cover it. Now, this is not going to be like a point for point going through it the way I did with the summation of the SAG-AFTRA agreement that resolved that strike. Partially because we don't have the same degree of details. What we have right now, at least that appears to be publicly available, is just a blog post from SAG-AFTRA updating what had happened. We don't have a summation or bullet points or anything like that, so there's less for me to go over. But it is still vague to the point that I didn't really want to parse it, and my focus is going to be much less on the specific wording of the agreement. I'll go over some of it, and I'll talk about some of the concerns that have been raised by people affected by it, but I want to talk much more about how this appears to have happened, or at least the questions that are raised based on how this appears to have happened, and why. Why did this happen? So before we cover the why, we should probably take a look at the fact that this is not a good thing. So an agreement was reached with a company called Replica, and that will allow them to make offers to voice actors to create AI voice replicas that can then be licensed and used in future projects. The thing that the SAG-AFTRA announcement focuses on is what was quote unquote earned in this. They are required to actually get consent and permission to do this, that actors do not have to give license in perpetuity. There isn't a lot of details about what the residual and payout would be, but the thing is, the only version of this that where even if there is good residual payout forever, there probably isn't, but let's assume for a second there is, that's still a problem because most voice actors aren't looking to just kick back and get residuals for the rest of their lives. Performers like to perform. Most voice actors, well, most of any kind of actor, but yeah, we're talking about voice actors here. Most voice actors don't want to just sit back and collect a paycheck. I mean, like, we live in a capitalist society. I'm sure they do want to collect a paycheck, but most of them want to keep working because this is an artistic medium. It's something that people tend to be very passionate about. So most of them don't want to just sign away the rights to their voice to be used in future projects while they sit at home and get bored out of their mind because nobody is actually hiring them to stand in a booth and work anymore. And another thing about this is an actor does not even have to sign up to allow their voice to be used for these AI models to get completely screwed over. Because all it's going to take is a couple of recognizable voices to sign off on this. And do you really think that a AAA video game studio is going to hire a voice actor that nobody knows the name of when they could get a voice replica of a celebrity for probably comparable price, if not cheaper? Now, there are a lot of concerns about this. One of the major ones, and this did also come up with the SAG-AFTRA deal that resolved the strike last year, but it was a lot more front and center in this one because an actual flat-out agreement was reached with an AI company, whereas that agreement between SAG-AFTRA and the studios was with them, and that still required additional stuff to be worked out with those kinds of companies. So what I'm going to talk about, there was this kind of concern there, but it's much bigger here. And that is the concern that, yeah, technically performers have the right to say, no, I don't want my AI, my voice to be used to create an AI replica. But that can start becoming a requirement for work. If you want to work this gig, you have to let us do that. There is already concern that that could happen with live action actors in film and TV as well. That is less of a pressing concern because AI voice replication is a hell of a lot farther along than actual visual recreations of somebody. So whereas with the film and TV actors, the concern was a little bit more about heading off future things at the past, this is very much already viable. The ability to create AI replicas, like you may or may not have either seen or heard, I guess rather, voice filters on things like TikTok that just make you sound different.
This artificial intelligence lets you speak with any, and I mean any celebrity voice in real time. Just tremendous, real time.
But the question is, who really is considered to be a celebrity?
It's already frighteningly plausible. So whereas with the previous agreement that ended the main strike, that was mostly to head off future issues. This was already an issue, and SAG-AFTRA appears to have just conceded to it. So yeah, this is a big problem, and this is immediate. But I'm not going to focus on the ins and outs of the deal itself because, as I said, I don't know a lot of details. What I will talk about, though, is the fact that this happened behind closed doors and appears to have happened with very little, if any, approval from the actual affected members. It is the claim of SAG-AFTRA that the proposal was, quote, approved by affected members of the union's voiceover performer community. That is vague as hell. It doesn't say how many members were consulted or had any kind of internal vote. We don't even know to what degree their approval was. Was it just them looking and going, that looks good? Did they have veto power? Who were they? That last one's actually a pretty big one because one of the things that has happened is a heck of a lot of voice actors, including some of the most prominent names in video game voices, have come forward and said, not only did I know nothing about this going on, I don't know anyone who was consulted. A very specific person who said that was Steve Blum. The man is a staple of video game voice acting. And actually, video game voice acting, at least for prominent characters as opposed to background or smaller one-off characters, is a much smaller community than you'd think. You check the credits for a lot of things, and you will find the same several dozen people showing up in dang near anything if it's, AAA, high budget video game development. So this is not that huge an acting pool. And he has said flat out, I heard nothing about this and I don't know anyone who has. So who the hell were the affected members who approved this? We don't know. This is almost the complete opposite of what happened when the strike initiated last year. Because there, everything was very upfront. Like, here's what's going on in the negotiation. Here's the breakdown. Here's where we're having problems. Here's why we're striking. And even after they got a deal, it got put to the members to vote. This was not voted on, not by the membership at large. It wasn't brought to them. Negotiations weren't talked about. This is just something that it was said, hey, this is a thing. And this seems completely at odds with how SAG-AFTRA dealt with the earlier strike, in particular around the issues of AI. It is almost a complete turnaround, at least from the philosophical standpoint of guarding actors' jobs from being taken by AI. Because again, it's not just a matter of money. Yes, the money is also a problem because again, we have bills to pay, we have rent to pay, we need to be able to live. I say we, I'm not in the union, but we collectively, the people, and these actors as well. So the money does matter. But just knowing that they're not going to get replaced and they're going to get to continue to work, because again, this is a passion career. This is a passion industry. You may not be passionate about every single job that you do, but the work in and of itself, you are doing it or you got into it because you want to do this. So even if you make proper residuals on this, you won't get to work as much. Why would they allow for that when they tried so much harder to guard against it on film and TV actors? Well, the first thing that I'm not going to bring up is I'm not going to do any kind of speculation or at this point lend any credence to any idea of impropriety or bribery or somebody being paid off or what have you. I am not going to say that such a thing is impossible, but I am going to say at present there is literally no evidence of that, and I do not want to stoke that kind of narrative here without any evidence. That having been said, as cautious as I am about being overly speculative and in general being very wary of conspiratorial narratives, I am going to be a little bit speculative about this in a way that unfortunately has to be slightly conspiratorial, because on its face, this makes no sense. On its face, it does not make sense that they just threw the video game voice actors to the wolves and didn't call for strikes, didn't call for support, didn't do anything. They just came forward and said, hey, we cut this deal. And people approved it. Who? Who did? How? The lack of transparency, the suddenness of this, it is all a complete 180. So why? Well, as I said, I am going to get slightly speculative about this. Well, actually, let's start with something that isn't particularly speculative, but is unfortunate, which is that TV and film actors are simply better protected and more valued. Like the fact that voice actors in general and performers who do things other than, the major TV and film performance stuff, which was the division that was striking, last year, because there are other divisions of the union, the fact that they are valued more highly and also like numerically kind of make up the bulk of it, that's something everybody knows, but it's rare to see it so blatantly on display that they were fought for and the video game voice actors were not. Video game voice actors were on the picket lines. They were supporting these other people, and they had a right to expect the same kind of support for their own similar issues. And it just, I was going to say it didn't happen. It wasn't even given a chance to happen, because there's a decent chance that other actors would have joined them on the picket line, but they didn't even have the option. That kind of leads me into the first thing out of the two things that I'm going to float as being possible reasons. Because again, on its face, this makes no sense. So I have to come up with something. And I don't want to get overly accusatory and conspiratorial about it, but okay, I'm going to jump in here. I actually had a whole thing that I went off on that looking at it in the edit actually doesn't make sense. But in double checking some things, I have found what does make sense. So SAG-AFTRA is actually currently in active negotiations with the biggest video game companies in the world. And back in September, a strike was authorized. Now, an authorization is not the same as a strike beginning. Authorizing it simply means it is on the table as a tool in negotiations. So far as I can tell, those negotiations have not wrapped up. No strike has been called, so they're continuing to work under the existing agreement. But now I cannot help but wonder if this is meant to influence those negotiations. If possibly the leadership of SAG came to the conclusion that they weren't going to get the concessions about not using AI that they were hoping to get, and instead opted to try and do separate negotiations with a company so that they can now say to the video game companies, hey, okay, if you're going to do that, you have to do it through these people that we have an agreement with. Which in the broadest sense, I could kind of get. If you feel like you can't win on a certain point, at least doing what you can to take control of it is a tactic that makes sense. But that doesn't remove the issues with how skeezy this was done and how it cut out the voting members. But I wouldn't be shocked if part of the reason for this is to avoid another strike, possibly for political reasons, with SAG-AFTRA not wanting to appear to be just a monkey wrench in the machine that strikes all the dang time. Those optics would not be great for the organization. Doesn't make this okay. They cut out the actual affected members. That needs to be underlined and never forgotten. But then there's the other thing. As I said, there was some AI that is not massively dissimilar to this, at least in principle, in the SAG-AFTRA deal from last year in terms of, okay, this stuff, we're not going to ban it entirely, but it has to be consented to. There have to be these agreements. It's not in perpetuity. From glance at the summation, it's not even a summation, the blog post that we got, that deal was probably had more guardrails in place than this does. But I can't be certain of that. But that's certainly the feel of it. But as I said, a lot of that is speculative because AI for recreating actors visibly, I'm not going to say doesn't exist, but it's difficult, it's expensive, and it's not quite there yet. So there's a part of me that wonders, was SAG-AFTRA willing to send the voice actors out into the wilderness, throw them to the wolves to see how badly they get mauled? Because if things move forward, and I don't think this scenario is likely, but let's consider all possibilities here. If things move forward and just the AI thing just doesn't really go anywhere, it doesn't get used that much, most people don't agree to it, and they are still getting work even though they don't agree to it, then the union might feel comfortable not being as tough on AI issues on future contract negotiations because they'll have a point of reference where it's not purely hypothetical. Or flip side, if the voice actors start getting replaced left and right, then SAG-AFTRA will know how hard it has to fight against AI the next time the contract negotiations for the rest of the union comes up. Again, I don't want to actually accuse them of handling the voice actors for video games as a sacrificial lamb, but it would be an explanation. It would be a reason. Because otherwise, what the hell? And just the disrespect. Because, to be clear, voice actors for video games, while their contracts are not all lumped together with the section of the union that was striking last year, they're part of the same union. They pay the same dues. They are supposed to get the same kind of protection. They're supposed to have their jobs fought for to the same degree, even though they are a separate section that has its own contracts being negotiated at different times and with different bodies than what happened last year. They're still part of the same union. They're supposed to get the same backing, and they didn't. They just didn't. I can almost guarantee you if this had been put to a vote, especially if it had been put to a vote only to the affected voice actors members of the union, it would have gotten shut down. I can't find anybody who says this is a good idea. Now, that's not to say literally every voice actor is speaking out against it. No, that would be an exaggeration. But I have not found any voice actors who have gone on the record or said anything publicly who had anything positive or even neutral to say about this. Everybody who has spoken has says this is a terrible deal. And they feel betrayed. And I don't blame them. Does this mean I'm going to stop supporting SAG-AFTRA or unions in general? No, it doesn't. Unions are still important. Unions are vital. But unions are also not infallible. Unions can and will make bad decisions, bad calls, and just do bullshit. They are capable of it. They are not immune from it. But their existence is still vital so that there is some kind of counter to the powers of corporations and conglomerates, etc. But let this be a reminder, unions aren't perfect. We need them. And I will not stop supporting unions as a whole. I'm not even going to stop supporting SAG-AFTRA in specific. But this specific deal is absolute bullshit. And like I say, I won't stop supporting them. That's all philosophical for me anyway. I'm not a member. But it also means that I have even less reason to stay quiet. Would it harm my potential membership into the union for me to say, you messed up and you did something crappy? Maybe. Realistically, I was never going to get an offer. So let's just be honest. This was a terrible deal. And they screwed over people. People who they made it very clear they don't think as well of as the kind of actors who were striking last year. So there we go. Voice replicas. God damn it. What do you think about all this? Whatever your thoughts might be, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Try not to get any more conspiratorial than the degree to which I was willing to go. Don't let it turn into just a spiral of nonsense in the comments. But if you want to support what I can do, Patreon is a huge help for that. But even if you can't support me that way, like, share, subscribe, links to other things I do in the description. But don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember, especially if you got the raw end of this deal, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Drum roll for my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Ruben LaFulla, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Turok, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Gozer the Gozerian, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Geek Filter, Melinda Walters, Toby Jackson, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, T Love, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pau Barabajoggle, and Mira G. Thanks so much.